Welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. Today, we are going to review Innistrad Crimson Vow for any potential additions to the 99 of one of the decks residing in the Burgeoning Commander catalog, Xenagos, God of Revels. In order for a card to be included into a deck in the Burgeoning Commander catalog, one or more of the following criteria must be met. Number 1. Is the card a better version of one already in the 99? The new card should be an improvement over the replaced card in some measurable aspect other than it's new. A new card should replace a card of similar mana value and ability. For the purposes of redundancy, if a new card is added to the deck without replacing a card of similar function, then there must be enough justification to do so due to potentially weakening another area of the deck. We can't add a card just because. Number 2. Does the card strengthen any of the deck's themes? Decks in the BCC operate under carefully laid out themes and schematics. Any introduction of new cards must either maintain these themes or enhance them in some way. It will be difficult to justify including a new card into a build that does nothing to support the pre-existing themes of a deck. Number 3. If a card is not a better version of one already in the 99 and does not strengthen any of the deck's themes, then why is the card being considered? It's not impossible to find a slot for any card in any deck. If a card serves no other purpose than just being new and different to a build, then it is unlikely to enhance thematic synergies or strengthen win conditions in that same deck. These are important factors to recognize. Just because we can add a new card to a deck doesn't mean we should. The challenge will be to protect every build from becoming homogenized due to the frequent influx of new cards entering the format. It is reasonable, from a deck building standpoint, to slightly weaken an area of strength for the purposes of including an outside-the-box card, but it has to make sense to the overall vision of the build. With these caveats in mind, let's talk about some new cards from Crimson Vow and discuss any potential additions that can be made to the 99 of this deck. You can look in the description for links to the deck list and deck tech of this build. There are only a handful of Crimson Vow cards worth mentioning as a fit for this Xenagos deck. Are any worth including in the 99? Let's find out. Helana and Elena Partners is a 2/3 with first strike and reach for 2 red and green mana. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature we control, where X is Helana and Elena's power. That creature gains haste until end of turn. This is a light version of Xenagos, God of Revels. Without any additional power boosts, Helana and Elena will slap 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature and give it haste. Unlike Xenagos' temporary power and toughness boosts, these are counters and will remain on our creature. Now, in conjunction with Xenagos, Helana and Elena could create powerful synergies and potentially end games much quicker. Unfortunately, Helana and Elena do not have evasion and offer nothing more than a lighter version of Xenagos' combat trigger. Nearly every creature in this deck has evasion or some other game-breaking ability. For the purposes of this build, however, Helana and Elena would be better left out of the 99. 2 +1/+1 counters and enabling haste is just not enough. Pass. Glorious Sunrise is a modal enchantment for 3 and 2 green mana. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we choose one of the following. Number 1. Creatures we control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. Number 2. Target land gains tap, add 3 green mana. Number 3. Draw a card if we control a creature with power 3 or greater. Number 4. We gain 3 life. This enchantment covers a lot of bases with its litany of options. However, is it good enough for this Xenagos deck? Let's take a closer look. Its first mode gives creatures we control +1/+1 and trample. We rely on big and evasive creatures to deliver victory through Xenagos enhanced combat. Nearly half of the creatures in this build have trample, and the 99 is flooded with spells and effects that grant trample. If we stack the triggers accordingly, allowing Glorious Sunrise to resolve first and then Xenagos's, this combination will give one of our creatures an additional +2/+2 until end of turn. There's the drawback of enabling redundant trample as well. Glorious Sunrise's second mode is a great source of ramp. However, we must wait until our second main phase in order to utilize this mana to cast our mammoth creature spells, which nerfs Xenagos' combat-focused ability to provide temporary buffing and haste to a creature after it is summoned. This also leaves the creature vulnerable to spot or mass removal without the benefit of attempted combat. This enchantment's third ability nets us a card as long as we control a creature with power 3 or greater. Although every creature in this build has power 3 or greater, the card draw mode is still dependent on controlling one of them at the beginning of our combat. No creature, no card. The final mode gains us 3 life in a format where we begin with 40. So, let's summarize Glorious Sunrise's potential in this Xenagos build. The temporary +1/+1 buffing is inadequate in a deck with such large creatures, and the trample enabling is redundantly useless to nearly half of the creatures in this build. This mode is better suited for tribal builds or tokens. The timing of the ramp mode hinders the schematic theme of this deck. It does not allow Xenagos to enable any creatures cast during our second main phase with his combat trigger, which is the only time we would cast creatures with this ramp mode. The card draw mode is dependent on controlling a creature, and the life gain mode seems underpowered for the investment of 5 mana. Elder Gargaroth is a better fit for this deck and has the same mana value. Glorious Sunrise can be a valuable enchantment in the right build. It's just not this one. Pass. Ulvenwald Oddity is a 4/4 beast with haste and trample for 2 and 2 green mana. We can pay 5 and 2 green mana and transform it into Ulvenwald Behemoth, an 8/8 beast horror with haste and trample, and it gives other creatures we control +1/+1 haste and trample. Ulvenwald Oddity could be a potential replacement for Questing Beast in this build. Questing Beast's place in the deck is justified by the high prevalence of planeswalkers in my metagame. Absent these spark users, it would not be difficult to insert Ulvenwald Oddity into Questing Beast's slot. However, for the purposes of this deck's need to address planeswalkers, this cannot come to pass. Upon perusing the other creatures in the 99, I do not see one that is worse than Ulvenwald Behemoth. Do you? Pass. Cartographer's Survey is a sorcery for 3 and 1 green mana. We look at the top 7 cards of our library and put up to 2 lands from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and then put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. The odds are in our favor with the spell, as we should, on average, get 2.7 land cards for every 7 cards drawn or revealed from our library. However, as Magic players, we know that these odds do not hold up often. Imagine investing 4 mana into the spell and completely whiffing, or putting a single tapped basic land into play. Is this spell better than Skyshroud Claim? No. No, it's not. Is this spell better than Cultivate or Kodama's Reach? No. No, it's not. If the lands entered the battlefield untapped, then maybe we can convince ourselves that it is. But they don't, so it's not. Pass. Retrieve is a sorcery for 2 and 1 green mana that returns up to 1 target creature card and up to 1 target non-creature permanent from our graveyard to our hand. We expect our creatures to die. It's EDH, that's what happens, particularly for decks where combat is the primary win condition, and even more so when we're running the biggest and baddest creatures Gruul has to offer. In this Xenagos build, the turnover of creatures becomes a next creature up mentality, with our only current forms of creature recursion coming from Finale of Devastation and Reap the Past. If anything, I would recur a valuable instant or sorcery spell from the graveyard than a creature card or a non-creature permanent. The restrictions placed on what can be recurred are not a sufficient hedge for this spell's reduced mana cost. I would rather include Regrowth or Balaged Recovery in the 99. Pass. Cultivator Colossus is a plant beast with trample for 4 and 3 green mana. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we control. When Cultivator Colossus enters the battlefield, we may put a land card from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. If we do, we draw a card and repeat this process. So our Crimson Vow review comes down to this creature, the Cultivator Colossus. Ramp, card draw, a big old tramply menace, one that Xenagos would target with great zeal at the beginning of combat. Well, let's take a deeper dive and see if there is a slot in the 99 for this creature. If we hardcast Cultivator Colossus, it seems unlikely that we would have a land in our hand at this point in the game, particularly due to paying 7 mana to summon this creature. So its Enter the Battlefield trigger would most likely whiff. In this instance, is Cultivator Colossus any better than Rampaging Brontodon, a creature that was replaced in this deck by Savage Ventmaw many moons ago? If we strip away the ETB trigger, we're left with just a big trampling creature that does nothing else. Is that good enough? We do employ various cheat effects in the deck, such as Sneak Attack, Ilharg the Razeboar, Lurking Predators, Summoning Trap, Selvala Stampede, and Quicksilver Amulet, all of which have mana values less than Cultivator Colossus's. Cheating it into play seems to provide the best bang for our mana buck when it comes to reaping the benefits from its ETB trigger. Again, however, that's only 6 sources of potential cheating from the 99. I believe that this creature is much more valuable and powerful in a Lands Matter or Landfall deck than a Xenagos build. But I am willing to give Cultivator Colossus a test run and see how it performs secondary to its Enter the Battlefield trigger. I envision Cultivator Colossus temporarily replacing Hellkite Tyrant during its probationary period. The number one determining factor with respect to its permanent inclusion in the 99 will be the success of its Enter the Battlefield trigger. With lackluster results, Hellkite Tyrant will regain its spot in this build. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this Crimson Vow review. Let me know in the comment section below what you would include and what you would replace. I appreciate all of your feedback as we cultivate the burgeoning Commander catalog through the suggestions made by the MTG BC. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.